And the purpose of this panel, I was asked to chair, was to look at why will 6G, or what will the 6G pack bring to the comms party? Now, I think it's more than a pack of beer, but I think what we're going to do is to try and unpack some of the things that 6G will bring. And given that we're the last speakers between now and drinks, we'll try and keep it brisk and tight, but I'd asked each of the panelists just to say a few words by way of introduction to what their role is. And if we could start with you, Marie, given the importance of diversity and also the importance of what you're doing for BT. Thank you.
Thank you. So my name is Maria Cuevas. I'm Networks Research Director. Within BT, we do what we call applied research, which means effectively every technology, every new innovation that we develop or co-develop, most likely, because we work very closely with industry, is very much straight away thinking, how do we apply it to our network and to the future of our business? Within my remit, as I said, look after networks research, so that's across fixed and mobile. So not just looking, if you like, at 5G and 6G in the future, but also looking at the future of our optical access technologies, optical core transport. We do look at quantum compute, which Vish mentioned before, and the use of quantum technologies actually to secure our networks in the future. We look at the future of computing in general, et cetera, et cetera. But we will get into more detail into 6G later. We are starting to think about what are the candidate technologies for 6G. We are very keen that we don't jump into conclusions too quickly as an industry, which is why now is the time actually to be thinking exactly what is it that we would like a future generation to look like. So that's where our focus is. Thank you very much.
Maria, we'll come back to you. Jean, please introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. So I'm Jean Schwoerer. I work with Orange. In fact, I work in research and, of course, applied research in networks and infrastructure. So, of course, that leads us to 6G. And in fact, 6G, it's a long journey because research in 6G, from our point of view, started in 2020 with the launch of the ExaX European Research Project. And we are more or less foreseeing a commercial opening of 6G by 2030. So that's 10 years. That's the time it takes to develop a next G. So, of course, we need to anticipate a little bit. As a research entity, our role is, of course, to develop new technology and help make better choice, I would say. And when we need to make choice for what will come in 10 years, it's of course a bit challenging. What is clear for us is that in the previous generation, we were using technology to improve capacity, to develop and bring better networks, and people were waiting for it because we just were lacking capacity. So there was more need, more demands than what we had. In 5G, it started to change a little bit because 5G, in fact, was the first generation that wasn't designed for smartphones only. It tried to open things to our digitization of the society. You can recall massive IoT on one side, ultra-critical communication on the other side. This is when mobile networks started to address other needs than just your cell phone. And I'm pretty sure that 6G will have to continue this journey because here the need is not just to use technology to improve networks, but to bring a useful tool for our customers, for operators, of course, for the whole society, in fact. We need a useful 6G.
That's great. Ed, would you mind just introducing yourself and also the new departmental name that you work for?
Right, I'm Ed King. I work for DSIT, or the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology. I've been there since its founding days, 17 weeks ago in February. Before that, I did 3 years with doing almost exactly the same job for the Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport. So what DSIT is it's effectively the digital part of DCMS, which strangely enough keeps the name DCMS, but now the D stands for department, into DSIT. So what I do there is clearly not a civil servant. I'm a freelance who is a technical advisor into DSIT. and what we did is there's been a number of programs there. 5G testbeds and trials, which started about 5.5 years ago. This is pretty much does what it says on the tin. 5G, as in the last year's model before we all went 6G, but setting up projects that took a look at developing either use cases on 5G platforms, that's what 5G testbeds and trials did, through a number of projects or a number of programs. So right the way from the phase 0 projects, which looked at putting 5G in rural spaces, right the way through to the last competition, which looked at doing more interesting use cases. So using 5G for doing live broadcast, stuff like that. We've now moved on from being 5G testbeds and trials to being the Future Networks program. Yeah, that's got it the right way around. And we're, again, doing things, but it's more involved in platform and diversification of platform, so we're not entirely stuck with the two key vendors in the market, Nokia and Ericsson. We're looking outside that. We're just closing another project, bids for grant funding, called the Open Networks Ecosystem, or WAN. So if you haven't got your applications in already, you're too late. That closed a couple of weeks ago. If you have got your applications in, don't talk to me about them, because I can't say anything about them at all. And you're due to be informed about that in the next couple of weeks. But again, that's a slightly different spin, and we're looking at more. We've moved back again, so we're not just looking at the platform as we were in the Frank, Phonic, and what was the other one? One would be the third one of them, wouldn't it? Competitions. We slightly look back to doing interesting things on the platform as well as the platform itself.
Ed, before we leave your introduction, can we just ask you, what do you think has been learnt over the last 5.5 years, and what still needs to be learnt from the trials?
Right. So from the trials, we're able to push things that aren't available on commercial networks, on public networks. So we're looking at doing interesting things that will eventually be of benefit, that will catch up. So through private networks, we've looked at doing things like network slicing, which doesn't just concentrate on the 5G enhanced mobile broadband, i.e. just getting more speed to your general customers. It increases the ability to deal with things like massive machine-type communications or massive Internet of Things, and the whole reliability of service side of things. So we're looking at doing those things, and those, I think, will be the themes that translate into 6G.
Great. Back to you, Jean. Jean, clearly 5G's got a long way to go even before we touch on 6G. What are the new things that we should see before 6G arrives that you would like to highlight to the audience?
Yeah, for sure. It's not like we roll out a generation and then it stays untouched for 10 years before the next one. It's a continuous evolution, and 5G will do that. There is, first of all, the deployment of 5G SA that is more or less ongoing or still awaited depending on country, but we all see that it's becoming real, and it will bring so new capabilities. We are talking about slicing, for example. We also see that some application like massive IoT, massive NTC, it's already existing, but it's something that is it's already used, but really under the anticipated level. And we expect that to continue to rise as long as people will adopt, will understand the benefit it can bring. So there is a large move ongoing with 5G, and the whole specification process of 5G enhancement. So we'll continue in 3GPP, and we'll continue to hit the live networks with time to time. And I would say that 5G won't stop by 2030. We know that we are more or less discussing right now about phasing out 2G in the next coming years. Well, 2G entered the market in 1912. So yeah, 5G is here and will continue to stay with us for long.
A lot more to do. Marie, the same question to you in terms of what approach you have. How are you seeing evolution with 5G? What are the new demand areas that you see being provoked before we get to 6G?
Yeah. I mean, just to continue with what John was saying, we are in the middle of rolling out our 5G SA core and migrating customers onto it. And the main reason for, I suppose, deploying this SA core is twofold, actually. I think one is from an operational perspective, because it becomes fully virtualized, containerized. We actually operate it and manage it in a very different way to how we used to do networks in the past. So I think there is an operational aspect, and of course, achieving increasing automation, levels of automation in the network is going to be key. It's going to be key from an efficiency perspective, and it's also going to be key to improve customer experience. So there is the operational aspect, but of course there is the new revenues promise of 5G, which comes with network slicing, with a lot of the capabilities that will enable us to offer what I tend to refer to as different SLAs effectively to different customers. And that ability to differentiate the services to different customers allow you to offer, again, new experiences, new services. For me, those two are the key things that we need to concentrate on, the evolution of the operational model and the achieving that promise of the new revenues that 5G, I suppose, has put on the table.
And how are you linking to new technologies that aren't pure network, for example, AI or some of your quantum key distribution activities? How are you linking those in? Because these things should happen before 6G.
Absolutely. Is that to me as well?
To you, go on.
Yeah, very happy to. So we actually, I mean, we have a team already in my area looking at how AI can be applied to the entire network, by the way. This is not just 5G. But if I focus on 5G, I've just been at a meeting earlier today talking about this. We actually apply AI to how we plan capacity in our networks. We understand a lot better the customer behaviors and how to forecast the behaviors across the entire network so that we can make very targeted decisions about where we invest the money. It might not be a very kind of futuristic type of scenario, but it's one that can actually save you a lot of money or make you make much better use of your money. If I touch on quantum for a minute, we actually have a quantum key distribution trial in London with live customers in it, and that's mostly about securing communication across our networks. And that, again, it doesn't really matter whether it's fixed or mobile. It does touch across all technologies. More relevant, I think, to the future of perhaps 6G, once we get into that topic, is how quantum computing itself can actually accelerate the pace at which we adopt artificial intelligence, machine learning technologies, and so on. So one of the things we're looking to explore is what applications can benefit from quantum computing to help us, coming back to how we operate our networks, how can we improve the levels of automation and how we apply AI to our networks. So that's our main area of focus right now.
And Maria, are there other technologies that we should be considering before 6G that you haven't mentioned?
Well, I think we need to look across actually all industries and adopt the best of, I mean, AI is such a vast term actually, that I'm sure there are millions of innovations out there that we're not looking at just yet. So personally, I think AI is kind of so vast, if you like, that it will include things that we're not even considering at the moment. I think the one to keep an eye on, and obviously we are actually very actively involved in areas like TIP and other communities, is actually who are going to be the customers of our network or the applications or the content that is running over our network. So everybody's talking about the metaverse. So what does it really mean to our networks, and how are they going to consume capacity, or perhaps what quality of experience can we offer to our customers? So I think it's not just about technologies that can help us, it's obviously technologies out there that will make use of our networks as well.
Sure. Jean, in terms of areas that you need to look at beyond the network, what adjacent areas are you considering, such as security, for example, or quantum? Are you picking up some of the trends in this area pre-6G?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that security and more globally trust, meaning the ability to establish trust between parties, is a key feature that's requested by lots of industrial usage to allow transaction of sometimes some part of untrusted infrastructure. So this ability to establish trust it's a key enabler for the adoption of digitization. And here, 6G is expected to be clearly a tools to build that, but this need is already there right now. So it's already something that is addressed currently. One of the other options that's quite hot right now is non-terrestrial networks. We have specifications that will be out, or that maybe is already out just now. So it means that the technology will be there. The way it interacts with the terrestrial network remain to be clarified, and it's a strong change. It's a key enabler to provide a wide coverage, and here again, a wide coverage, this ability to have good enough coverage everywhere, it's also something that's really an incitation to rely on your network, because your network will be there whatever happens. It's a strong push, but it's also lots of question. Clearly, we will need some time to find the right balance between various technology, various interests. I'm sure that 5G will have some first deployment, and that it will help to have it perfectly balanced in 6G. And talking back to AI, one other point is that the network is a user of AI, because, as Maria said, network automation, efficient network automation, accurate network automation will have to use AI to make the right choice with a fine granularity. But our customers, our clients will also use lots of AI application. And here we have something to do to better host their AI application, which means computing load rightly located, but also a large amounts of data to transport, because AI work with data, data to learn, data to process, and we clearly need to integrate this moving paradigm into our network dimensioning.
Ed, we've covered several other technologies that happen pre-6G. Does this affect the range and scope of the trials you're envisaging by next steps? Satellites, HAPS, drones, perhaps more AI related to telecoms, perhaps also more quantum related to telecoms?
So if anything, we're ahead of the curve in that we've already looked at satellites for backhaul and stuff like that. We've had both Skylink and OneWeb involved in providing coverage to really rural areas, rather than hitting all the end users directly with satellites. We just use it as a backhaul for 5G and then drop in either mobile or fixed wireless access services in there. And there's 3 projects that's dealt with this. Other technologies we're looking at as part of the 5G work that will figure in there. There's an awful lot of machine learning in there, because if you take a look at what's going on with a complex network, there's an awful lot of northbound data, what is actually happening on the network. And once the data gets past a certain scale, it's not practical for people to look at the data, even with years of experience, and tell exactly what's going on. So throwing machine learning at it and taking a look at the patterns that are coming out is a really big trend that we're looking at in there. The other item that's of interest at the moment is the reconfigurable intelligent surfaces model. And I don't believe in magic, but that's as close as I've seen to magic in terms of network technology, to the extent that I've even kicked one of them and it still works exactly the same way after me kicking it. So it's robust as well as magic. There's a lot of things that we're finding our way in there. So, the thing about 6G is nobody knows what it is yet. So there's a whole bunch of pre-standard stuff flying around that's either finding its way into the latter releases of 5G, or we're getting in at the research stage with universities and taking a look at early on, to take a look at and get them established and then get them hooked into the whole research, engaging standards, pre-standards, and then standards work.
And Ed, recognising there have been key lessons learned about understanding across sectors, across technology boundaries, is there a requirement to look at trials and test beds that are looking at the demand side more fully? And if so, what form could that take? Are there some sectors that need to be given better support beyond just the pure network and technology elements?
Right. So to progress in 5G, there needs to be more emphasis on sitting outside enhanced mobile broadband, which is basically what's out there with non-standalone at the moment. We need to find not just the technologies that support, but the economics that support things like network slicing. Network slice exists because it needs to exist, but won't really exist until we know how much it costs and how you balance it against building your own private networks. So the idea is, by building enough of these use cases, some will split off into private networks and not exist in the public domain because they can't exist because the economy doesn't scale in that way. Some will fire off into the public networks, and because the operators will think they can, make a reasonable profit from putting these things into place. The one lesson learned I haven't talked about is what we desperately need is a time machine so we can get the kit from the future and bring it back. The great disadvantage of testbeds and trials is we were 2 or 3 years ahead of the kit. So we're working on standards for which there wasn't any kit. So we now need to engage more at the pre-standards level and find friendly suppliers or research departments who can provide us with a kit that's good enough to run these testbeds and trials that doesn't have to be carrier grade strength, and find out what we can find out with that stuff.
And although we've discussed, Ed, the Wi-Fi, cellular, satellite, maybe NTN worlds, are your trials and testbeds moving towards a more converged world, which allows for wireline and wireless in combination, a network of networks? And if so, what form would that take? Certainly when issues of security or interconnect or streaming are considered, customers don't look at it in a wireless only or wireline only way.
Exactly. Well, it's a good thing they don't look at it in a wireless only or wireline way, because there is no way, given the physics of the thing, that wireless can ever compete with fibre. The amount of information you can send down a piece of relatively cheap fibre is much more than the sum of all spectrum that exists in usable quantities. So what we have to do is balance these things. So move when you need to move, stay at home and have higher, or stay in your premises and have a higher rate of interconnection by virtue of the fact that it's easier to carve these things up. There's also NTNs, non-terrestrial networks, are a real big deal for hitting the places that we don't hit well with fibre at the moment, because it's just not economical to dig out to these places.
Jean, can I come back to you and just ask a few more questions on testing? Obviously, Orange has many businesses around the world. What is the approach to network testing that Orange uses today in that 5G or early stages of 6G world? Do you have a central test lab, or do you believe in a cross-network test lab that's necessary for France or other countries? What is your testing philosophy?
So, we don't test 6G because 6G doesn't exist. There is nothing to test right now,
Yeah.
just to be very clear on that. In fact, there is different solutions. Yeah, of course, we have a test lab where we do conformance testing and so on, like many other operators. We have several countries within the Orange Group. Some countries are always more or less willing to test some new features, some new function, because basically they need it for market purpose. So of course, welcome to test. And we have also started test networks in France, which called PKO. It's a network, in fact, of a few thousand of friendly users. It's a network built from nothing, so it's not an evolution of the existing production network. It's a network built for that, on which we can play with whatever we need to test, and test it at a relevant scale. It's not a lab. Of course, it's not as big as a commercial network, but it's big enough to make a real test and see real phenomena that cannot be observed in labs. And this test tool, it's running from 2 years now. It has been pretty helpful, especially, for example, to test a different option of 5G SA deployment. It's a new philosophy, something that didn't exist before, and that Orange decided to implement because it was much more fitted for softwareized network, for cloudified network, because it allows it really allow to meet the short life cycle terms of development. So with that, we were able to cope with that in the sense that we can test, use, see what's happened, correct, retest, really much more quicker than what would have been possible in a commercial network. So that was a very efficient tool for that. One of the other point that's pretty important and that is changing to test is energy efficiency. It's something that is needed already, that will be more and more needed. It's clear that 6G, next generation network, whatever the name is, will have to contain their power requirement, because in the world in which we live, it will probably not be acceptable to increase by factor 10 or more the energy consumption consumed by IT infrastructure. And the telecom network will have to do their part to control that. And right now, we have some measurement and some measurement tool and so on to ask everyone to reflect that. But being able to test and quantify the energy consumption of the whole service chain is something that remains pretty challenging right now.
Maria, can you answer the same question from a security philosophy, a network testing philosophy point of view, and include security or new products in your answer?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose not very different to the way perhaps Orange or any other telco will do testing today. We all have our, very stringent requirements to do with reliability and security. We are national critical infrastructure providers, and therefore we have to comply to many regulations, and for very good reasons. So that make the testing process, as I say, very, very challenging and very rigorous, not least from a security perspective. But obviously, and I think we have been talking previously about new technologies, right? And how do we bring new technologies to the table? We absolutely need to leverage the new technologies to help us improve the efficiency and the way we do testing. And perhaps, and we've talked about AI earlier, we are already exploring how digital twins can help us, perhaps, with perhaps the, scale testing that you were referring to. Can we actually put, scale and demand and load onto the test bed using some of those new capabilities? So absolutely looking to leverage the new technologies to help us improve the way we do testing. Notwithstanding the fact that obviously new technologies are probably bringing more challenges to the testing environment, and I know that previous panels and conversations today have focused on areas like Open Run. Open Run in itself is going to bring a huge challenge to operators like us to cope, if you like, with that end-to-end testing for new, perhaps very, very heterogeneous components from different vendors. I think we will get there as an industry, but I think we need to do a lot more collaborative thinking about how we collectively do that, rather than trying to do it all on our own. So yeah, that's another perhaps thought to throw into this process.
So when we talk about the bridge from 5G to 6G, what sort of new technologies are you expecting by the time of 6G? And what are the preconditions that you think should apply in this area? Maria, if you could go first.
Well, first of all, I mean, I don't think everything in 6G should be about how can we apply X, Y, or Z to the next generation of 3GPP standards. I think it's going to be a combination of, as you say, what new technologies are available that we can leverage. Okay, and we have discussed a few here. But there is also going to be what is the target, what is it that we're trying to achieve, and then obviously look back at what are the tools in our toolbox. I think Greece is a very interesting one that Ed was commenting on. We're very close to actually some really good UK universities looking at some really good work in that space. I can highlight some of the work in what I would call multiplexing, and obviously MIMO being the main example, but I think any mechanism that allows us to reuse the spectrum in a very clever way will actually be very promising to how can we deliver more capacity from our most expensive asset in the mobile world, which is the spectrum. So I think anything that helps us, as I say, use our assets more efficiently. And again, we've probably talked at length about AI, but again, AI focusing on the operational side of things and the automation that I was referring to earlier. There is a concept I like very much that is starting to be discussed, which is how do we apply AI to the radio interface? And the one angle that I am very interested in is actually using that for backward compatibility. If we can actually achieve in the next, kind of wave of technologies that a much more efficient way to upgrade our networks, where we can actually support previous generations rather than having to reform spectrum and migrate and do a whole upgrade to our network. I think we need to become a lot more clever about how we solve those challenges. And again, I think a combination of these technologies can help us achieve that.
And Jean, for you, any preconditions you would expect to see for 6G? Can you excite the audience with any new applications or needs?
Oh, there is lots of exciting use cases for 6G. The one that is the most spread is probably what's called telepresence, or kind of immersive communication, of course. But what's important is that we need to remind that technology needs to be justified by value in the sense of we cannot just push technology because it's fun. We need to do it because it's useful, because it makes sense, because the market, in fact, needs it. On that, I tend to agree with Maria. We clearly think that race is something very interesting to. In fact, one of the challenges will be that we have a limited amount of spectrum, and we will need to use it more and more efficiently. Because if we want to increase capacity with a limited amount of spectrum, there is, no other option. Otherwise, we need to roll out fiber, as you said. And yeah, race is a way to do that. Convergence between multiple means of accessing networks, from mobile to Wi-Fi to fiber to satellite, so that we are able to deliver the best experience while making the best use of the available spectrum is also key. I'm pretty convinced that, AI at the physical layer to be able to adapt to the existing spectrum condition to deliver the best spectrum efficiency in the given condition, and not with a static configuration, but because the radio transceiver are able to adapt with what's happening on the radio channel. It's also a promising text, and I'm sure that a conjunction of all that will help to have a more efficient 6G. I will add also zero energy devices. It's a small device that are not very capable, but one of the key capabilities that they are able to power themselves by energy in their environment. And it's not having battery can be also a key enabler for logistic or other application require tag or small assets, and that will be also end device, a UE for the networks.
Ed, from a government point of view, for the transition from 5G to 6G, are there some highlights you would like to bring out and roles that government should play? Clearly, I think about international standards, but I also think about making sure we don't develop things for a rather small audience called the UK only. Any suggestions on international collaboration for the 5G, 6G transition?
Right, so I should be better briefed on this, but I work with some of the policy people. There is a UK wireless infrastructure strategy, part of which is the 6G strategy that says how you go about driving this thing forward. It is the government's stated intention to turn the UK into a technology superpower, and one of the 5 pillars they're building on is telecoms. And a lot of the work is being pushed towards the UK's strength in research and development, especially the universities, where funding's been made available already. There is a 6G policy being developed, and this again is funded and working with the right sort of people. But as you say, no man is an island. We can't face this thing alone. So part of the policy is actively engaging nations or organisations that have demonstrated strengths in 5G and are doing work in 6.
I'd also mention that Secretary of State Blinken from the USA last week signed a collaboration agreement with Finland, between the USA and Finland. That was clearly linked towards the Finnish NATO accession into NATO. So clearly this is no longer a telecoms only issue, particularly when issues like NATO are being considered. But I think at the end of the day, international standards are going to be needed, and I think we would all support those in that area. Are there any questions from the floor? We've got another 10 minutes left. Happy to take questions. If the microphone could go to the far right of my stage right at the back. Thank you very much. Please introduce yourself with your question, please.
Hello, it's Patrick Rokita, CTO, Titanium Platform. First, I wanted to ask the question 6G and terahertz, how realistic it is, but I take it back and instead want to ask a different question. What role do you see for 6G and the mobile core? Is mobile core becoming commodity? Are there expectations towards the mobile core beyond implementing 3GPP standards?
Well, we've got two converged operators here, as in BT and Orange. Who would like to go first? Maria, would you be happy to take that?
I am very happy. I wouldn't ever call it a commodity. Obviously, it is evolving in a way where I think it is a logical, I suppose, way to leverage, again, adjacent technologies, what is happening out there. So the whole move towards virtualization and cloudification of the mobile core, for me, it looked like the right move 2 decades ago, probably, and we're getting there. And I think it is definitely the right thing to be doing. As I was saying earlier, for me, the move to cloudification is not really just about cost savings, or I mean, obviously we all want cost savings, but for me, it's an operational benefit. Is how can we actually move and again leverage all the stuff in the IT world to help us automate and operate our networks much more efficiently. But very closely coupled with that, of course, and again, just if your question is mostly about the mobile core, I am a great believer that the move towards cloudification and all these, again, the automation and the SLA assurance and everything else that we're aiming for is about getting the new revenues, because we need to make more money out of this industry, and we're still stuck in the, mobile broadband space, and to get to that promise that, 5G made, and hopefully we will get there, we do need everything to come together. A cloudified mobile core that can be sliced, that can be managed end-to-end, that can be orchestrated. So it's not a commodity, but it's definitely evolving in the right direction. What I do hope is that 6G doesn't actually come up with a new mobile core, please, that we need to replace, and it's more of an evolution to the current system than, because I don't believe we need a new one, to be honest. I think what we need to do is evolve the existing one. Sorry.
Jean?
Yeah, I'm saying also that we will have a nice mobile core with 5G SA, and I'm not sure we need another new one. But more globally, we doesn't necessarily have to expect a revolution for 6G. It could also very well be an evolutionary approach from 5G, and there is no word already defined for that. But the evolutionary option is clearly a strong one. And your question was also about terahertz, if I'm right.
No, I think he wasn't going to ask that question. He
Okay,
said he was going to go to the other.
Perfect.
You go.
Well, maybe for another day. I think security is another factor as well in the core issue, making sure it's resilient and secure enough. Any other questions?
Can I make another point about the mobile core? Sorry, because we've touched on convergence, right, throughout the panel, and I really think the mobile core has a huge role to play in that. And as an industry, we still haven't cracked the convergence issue, and we come up with different kind of ways to integrate what we tend to call non-3GPP access from a very 3GPP-centric perspective. And what we need to do is actually come up with much better ways of, non-terrestrial networks, Wi-Fi, and cellular networks coming together. And I really think the mobile core has a huge role to play in that.
And I think it could be argued that some service providers are integrating it at the services level, pre-network integration level as well.
Absolutely.
So let's see what happens. Any other questions? I think everybody wants a drink. Am I?
Let's have a drink.
Let me just ask a final question, okay? A very final question to each of our panelists, starting with Maria. So Christmas is coming, not so far away. What's your wish for 6G?
Do I only have one wish?
Yes.
I'm going to go for more than one. I think coverage is should be a huge driver for 6G. And I think that encompasses a number of things that have been mentioned today. I think it's coverage from not just the actual geographical coverage perspective, but definitely need that one. And that comes with the network of networks, with the convergence, all the things that we have discussed here. But I think and again, convergence can be interpreted to mean many different things, but coverage. But I think it's coverage from also a reliability and a security perspective. So I think combining, efficiency, reliability, security, and ubiquitous coverage. Sorry, that's much more than one. That would be my wish.
Jean?
Yeah, we think that 6G needs to be sustainable in the wide meaning of this word. So it's sustainable, of course, it needs to be environmentally and energically sustainable, but it also needs to be economically sustainable in the sense that it needs to make sense, answer a given needs, and provide a valuable solution to this need. And yeah, for that, there is a conjunction of technological enablers, smart integration to realize, and that is the path that will lead to a successful and useful 6G. And the reach, of course, is to be able to follow that road, and that 6G will help then the society and the various industrial sector to take benefit of digitization, gain in efficiency, and be sustainable also.
Sustainability in its widest sense.
Yeah.
Ed?
Right, so I'm going for a much more base level. I'm hoping for a lot of bright, shiny new toys from Santa that the projects can have a go at and see whether they're any good or not. Some of them will be broken by Boxing Day, extending the Christmas analogy. Some of them will go on to be perennial favourites year after year. And the only way of finding out which is which is to get hold of them pre-standards and start breaking them.
Thanks very much. Please thank all our speakers today.